I'd like to call our meeting to order, please. It's June 17th, 2014. And if you'd like to join me for the flag salute, please do.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Francisco.
Here.
Hart.
Here.
Hotchkiss. Rouse.
Here.
White.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Murillo.
Here.
Mayor Schneider.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda, Mr. Armstrong?
Yes, there's one, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and that is item number 4 is going to be withdrawn and brought back at a future meeting. The Visit Santa Barbara wanted to do a little more work with some of the hotels.
Does the clerk need to read to the public what it is we're pulling?
Well, I just state it's the item regarding the Tourist Business Improvement District, item number 4.
Very good. Thank you. And we're going to public comment, and we have a few speaker slips, and our limit is 2 minutes, and it's really hard for me to cut people off, so try to go to 2 minutes. And there's a counter right there on the podium. So Larry Wellen, you'll be first, and followed by Tony Wellen, and then Kate Schwab. Okay, go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Larry Wellen, and I would like to give my time to Tony Wellen, and she'll need it.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wellen.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and the City Council members. The June 14th gun buybacks success exceeded all expectations, with 239 firearms exchanged for Vons gift cards, and when we ran out, $100 in cash. Would these guns have been crime guns? We know that these particular weapons will never be used in a homicide, suicide, accidental shooting, and therefore our community is that much safer. On behalf of the Coalition Against Gun Violence, I want to thank Mayor Schneider for her consistent support of the coalition and gun violence prevention, and we want to thank Chief Sanchez for believing a gun buyback in Santa Barbara would work. We are especially appreciative to Sergeant Riley Harwood and his team of officers and the young cadets. You had to be there to see the perfect organization and professionalism of these officers. One of the coalition's goals was to demonstrate to the community through our collaboration with the police department that our officers are enthusiastic about working to prevent crime. They voiced their appreciation right there on the site about being involved in the buyback. We want to also thank Congresswoman Lois Kapp, State Senator Hannah Beth Jackson, and Mayor Schneider for taking the time out of their busy schedules to be there with us on June 14th. And to be just as amazed when officers explained the details regarding the 6 assault weapons and 2 lethal semi-automatic Tech-9 handguns that were also turned in. Lastly, the gun buyback could never have happened without the donations of so many people, partner organizations, plus local businesses in our community, and Gun by Gun, a crowdfunding website. This was all donations by community people. This was a team effort, and I would like to quote Vince Lombardi. The achievements of an organization are the results of the combined efforts of each individual, and our community is that organization. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations on your success. So it looks like Kate Schwab and Maggie Campbell are going to come up together, and they'll be followed by Claudia Bratton with our solstice. Kate.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. I'm Kate Schwab, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Director for Downtown Santa Barbara, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you our new Executive Director, Maggie Campbell.
Nice.
Hi. I just wanted to come and say hello, and I'm very excited to be here. I have been absent from California for almost a decade, so this is a little bit of a homecoming, and I can't imagine a better place to be than Santa Barbara. So I've just been in the office yesterday and today, but I've been here long enough to know that we've had a long, very successful, strong partnership with the city, and I'm really looking forward to working with all of you. So thank you very much. I don't know if any of you have questions for me, but...
Well, we certainly welcome you, and I invite you to have coffee with me, and I know the other individual members would probably like to get to know you better. Anyone
Love to do
else?
that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Claudia Bratton will be followed by Phil Walker.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem and wonderful City Council members, I'm so happy to be here. And this Friday is when it all starts in the Alameda Park at 4 p.m. and then the parade. And most of you are going to be in the parade with us, so we're really excited. I brought you some. This is the ladies' tank. I brought this. I also brought the unisex shirt, which has the sun on the front, the moon on the back. And I brought you all some posters so you can really enjoy this. And the festival is going to be wonderful. We've really expanded our kids area for Saturday and Sunday. By the way, on Sunday, please come. Ambrosia is playing, the band that you all, I don't remember the hits, but they are there. And so it's a nice afternoon in the park. And also Friday night is Raw Silk. Many of you have wonderful, fond memories of them. This is the poster.
Very nice.
And it's done by Polly, who does the giant inflatables at the back of our parade. And our theme this year is games. And it's a very, very playful, fun year. And I have to say, from my perspective, the workshop has been better than ever. It's just, thank you all for getting us back in that space. I can't tell you. It's wonderful. Having pavement on the ground, believe it or not, is just made a wonderful difference. So we're very thrilled, and we're very thrilled of the support for next year. Thank you so much for bringing us up to that level. Thank you. We're so grateful to all the people in the city who come and support our event, and all the people who work for the city who help us with the myriad of details. And I think it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful celebration. Thank you.
We thank you. And thanks for the swag.
Our pleasure.
So Phil Walker is up next, and then Andrea Rosalinsky is our final speaker.
Change the seats up here. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor Pro Tem Murillo. It's a new one, the tongue twister. This is good to see. Mayor Garcetti, LA Mayor. You know, he sort of had a slip of the tongue the other day, and hopefully that'll blow over. But I highly commend what he's doing here. He's okayed a earthquake safety survey that's been in the press quite a bit. It was led off by San Francisco Mayor Yee within the last 6 to 8 months, and now Mayor Garcetti is rightfully rolling with it. And, you know, I think the city's talking about the state of California partnering on this, and the cities that have the soft storage structures, apartment buildings. Normally they're built over carports, and there's more than a few in this town too. The non-ductile concrete construction, I don't think we have that many anymore. There was seismic retrofits done of the State Street corridor, URM, unreinforced masonry in the late 80s. But, you know, this is good, and I think city building and safety needs to take a closer look at that and put out some thoughts about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our final speaker, Andrea Rosalinsky, please.
Good afternoon, Kathy and City Council members. This broke. Okay, wait. So I had a proposal because the other day I went to vote, and I've been thinking of a proposal for the city, kind of a grassroots effort. Like, I was thinking of something to share with you guys for a while, but when I went to vote, and I had to go by the church, I ran into Steve, you know, Satellite Radio Steve, and we were talking, and I just thought, he was saying how LA right now, they say LA is the #1 arts community in California, but I think we are. So I just wanted to propose some things like during First Thursday. It's kind of like a tongue twister. Well, maybe the proposal is a poetry podium, maybe out front, between this building and the new city attorney's office, where that little, I sit there sometimes on the wood. Or open it on First Thursdays there's so many yoga studios in town. Well, I kind of wrote this. That they could, on the first Thursday, maybe different yoga studios can come out and show the community different things and what their gifts are for us. And also, I'm in the sustainability club at City College, so maybe during May, May last month was a garden month, community gardens month, so maybe during May we can do different things on first Thursdays on the lawn out there. So that's my proposal. And I also want to say something, I don't know how to say it, but I called you the other day about, because I'm like kind of neutral. Well, like years ago I was talking to the county with Doreen Farr and Janet Wolf about doing garden, not gangs. But somehow my son, I don't know, this is kind of personal, but he thought that I was for the gang injunction when he's so overwhelmed. He's a math tutor, and so I just want to make the rumors go away, or that I'm kind of neutral on that. I just want safety and harmony in the city. And I bet I'm over my 2 minutes. All right.
I was listening to you, and you went over just a little bit. Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? No. Okay.
But marijuana is safer, so why are we driving people to drink? I have to return these to City College.
So we're going to move on to the consent calendar. And there's some items to read, please.
Item 3, adoption of Santa Barbara Countywide Integrated Water Management Plan, recommending that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara adopting the 2013 Santa Barbara Countywide Integrated Regional Water Management Plan. Item 8, acceptance of temporary construction easement at 1130 Punta Gorda Street for the Punta Gorda Bridge Replacement Project, recommending that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara to acquire and accept a temporary construction easement located at 1130 Punta Gorda Street and authorizing the Public Works Director to execute such agreement and related documents that may be required, all relating to the Punta Gorda Street Bridge project. Item 10, introduction of ordinance for lease agreement with Madco Corporation, DBA Big Brand Tire, recommending that council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving and authorizing the airport director to execute a 15-year and 5-month lease agreement with 3 5-year options between Madco Corporation, a California corporation, DBA Big Brand Tire, for 29,620 square feet of land, including 4,484 square feet of Building 370 at 6010 Hollister Avenue, which is Santa Barbara Airport property, effective July 17, 2014, for a monthly rental of $7,533, exclusive of utilities. Item 12, Second Amendment to Montecito Hall lease for operation of the Montecito Library site, recommending that council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving and authorizing the library director to execute the Second Amendment to the Montecito Hall lease agreement with the County of Santa Barbara and the Montecito Association for the operation of the Montecito branch of the Santa Barbara Public Library System. And item 13, public hearing for the Parking and Business Improvement Area Annual Assessment Report for fiscal year 2015, including recommendation B, that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara fixing and assessing the Parking and Business Improvement Area assessment rates for fiscal year 2015 and confirming approval of the Parking and Business Improvement Area Annual Assessment Report for fiscal year 2015.
I know that we have some requests to remove items from the consent calendar, but can we go to item 13 first? Mr. Armstrong, there was something that needed to be processed as part of this particular item?
Just for the record, that no one is asked to speak on that item.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and so Mr. Rouse, you wanted to pull an item? from the consent calendar?
No, Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I need to abstain from item 13 because I am a PBI paid member.
Okay, so we'll do that one separately. Councilmember White,
I have a question.
a question on number 12, okay? And Mr. Francis, no. Mr. Hart, is that you?
Yes.
Okay.
Item number 2, please.
Okay, and I have a question on item number 2. So we'll go in order. Item number 2, would you read that, please?
Legislative platform.
Okay, that was quick. Mr. Hart, you go ahead first.
Well, we did receive a letter or an email, I think today, about a specific reference on page 15 in the LEDGE program to supporting open ocean intake. And it just seems to me that our application is a separate issue from our LEDGE platform, and I don't know that we need to actually have anything in the LEDGE platform that references intake systems for desalination. So I guess my preference would be just to delete that one particular item. I think it's page 15. It says, support the use of screened open ocean intake for desalination. I think that, advocating at the state level for that isn't really part of our application effort or our program for reinstituting our desalination plant. So I don't know that it's helpful to that effort.
I agree with you, and on that topic, that was one of the items that I was noticing in the legislative platform, that I would be more comfortable removing it, because there are some questions about how our desal plant, if it's up and running, would take in water. So I agree with you, and we'll see if others do, about just deleting that particular reference. Anyone else on that particular issue?
I disagree.
Okay, and your reasons, or if you'd like to say?
Well, my reasons are, in the first place, I think the environmental concerns about intake pipes are vastly overstated. I really don't think that a 36-inch intake pipe is going to have much of an effect on the Pacific Ocean. And the alternatives that I've heard proposed, these subsurface galleries, sound totally unworkable. So to me, this is a position that makes scientific sense and common sense, and I think we should support it.
Thank you. Anyone else on that topic?
Well, Madam Mayor, Pro Tem, I think that we could be silent on it, and I don't think it hurts us. While I think Mr. Francisco has a good point that open ocean intake is one possibility, I think that there's a range of options that would be looked at in any given facility. And so to be silent on it, I'm okay with that. As I say, I also can see situations, perhaps including ours, where the open ocean intake may end up being the only feasible alternative, or in which case it would be, it's not like we're saying we oppose open ocean intakes, and I'm not going there. I just want my colleagues to be reassured on that front. But to be silent on it, I'm okay with that.
Okay, Councilmember Rouse.
Well, it is a bit of a moot point. I mean, we are neither advocating for or denying. I mean, it's not, we're not taking it off the menu of possibilities. If it were to be okayed under whatever process we need to go through to restart the desal plant, it is what I believe is out there currently. So I don't know if it's something, I don't know how much this statement matters either way, frankly. I mean, all points are valid on this argument, so.
Well, I would make this point that this could be considered throwing down a gauntlet, and that's not what I'm up to with my own views. It's not what I'm about with this. I think it's we're trying to have the minimum environmental impact while having an economically feasible facility. And having participated in the first round of desal environmental review here, I saw the research that was done and the work that was done to look at options, and I'm of the mind that it may be that in certain situations open ocean ends up being the only feasible alternative. So I don't want to take it off the table but I'm certainly fine with it being silent, and I would be willing to move that at this. I do move that at this point.
Second.
Very good. Did you have anything else to add, Mr. Hart?
I guess I would just echo Councilmember White's position, actually, and Councilmember Rouse's too, that I think that this is speaking to statewide legislation and having the city have its policy in regards to that particular precise point. I don't think this has anything to do with our application. At least that's the way I'm perceiving this. And, it takes us out of that debate at the state level and makes us focus specifically, I think, on our application and the merits of our application and in its specific circumstances. If I'm incorrect, if staff has a different view, I'd like to know, I guess.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council, just one issue, and that is that, and Ms. Bjork may help me out here, but our understanding is that the State Water Resources Control Board is in the process right now of developing regulations that relate to intake, structures, and so the reason this was in there would allow us to then comment to allow, open intake structures as a part of that. But if it's taken out, we'll still be engaged in working with them and commenting on proposed regulations. But that's the reason it's in here, because there's not legislation, but they're in the middle of developing regulations that we expect will come out in the next 6 months or so.
Well, I believe there's evidence that open ocean intake is harmful to larvae and small fish. So I'm willing to compromise to say that there's scientific evidence. I'm willing to compromise and say let's just take it off the table for now and let the regulatory processes, which are going to be rigorous, right? It's the Coastal Commission, it's our water discharge permit, and a lot of other regulatory arenas where this is going to be heard. So we have
Actually,
a motion.
I think I'd like to hear, Ms. Bjork came up, and I guess, is there language that we could use that gives you more flexibility in responding to what you just described that is different than this language?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hart, I think if you have an interest in taking it off the platform, I think that's fine. We had added it in because there is a statewide dialogue about the best alternatives, and there is the state regulatory development going on. So it's not just a city-specific issue. However, we will be dealing with it as a city-specific issue regardless. So
Okay.
if you want to remove it from the platform, I think that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Well, our city attorney has a comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to clarify the conversation I heard in following up on what Mr. Armstrong said. Basically, you're concerned with taking a stance on a statewide issue, not on the city's interests. So as Mr. Armstrong said, we could go ahead with comments that were beneficial to our application without necessarily having this in the platform.
Yes.
Thank you.
So all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed?
No.
No.
So that's 3-2. Thank you. So that was anything else on the legislative platform? I did want to mention that the original report that I got in reference to public safety and nuisance mentioned medical marijuana dispensaries, and I wanted to make sure that we were only going to take action on problem medical marijuana dispensaries. And Ms. Wan, you said that that language is in there. It just wasn't in this particular report.
Yes, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and council members, the current platform does read the way Mayor Pro Tem Murillo suggests, and that refers only to problem marijuana dispensaries. In the transcription from a PDF format to Word format, that word accidentally got omitted, but it is currently in our current platform, and it was intended to be in this platform as well. So I would, with your approval, I would like to reinsert that word.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, so there were other items. Number 12, please.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. My question is, this talks about a lease to Montecito. Perhaps we should have it read so that the discussion is.
She did read it.
So this is a discussion about the Montecito Hall lease, and it does not specify a number as to what. Is there a charge for it, or is it simply a free of charge operation there?
Margaret Esther, Library Services Manager. Thank you, Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and Councilmember White. There is no charge to us. This is a county building, and it is operating a library under the county contract, so there's no financial charge.
Okay, so you're okay with that one. And number 13, you need to abstain from. So do I have, that was you.
I would move approval of 13.
A second, please?
Second.
All in favor of number 13?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
And one abstain. Thank you. Did you get that, Madam Clerk? Okay, and...
I would move approval of the rest of the consent agenda, Madam Mayor.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're done with the consent calendar, it seems like. Sorry. So item number 15. So, Madam Clerk?
Police and Fire Service Retirement Plan of 1927 Cost of Living Increase, recommending that council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara increasing the service retirement benefit for the Fire and Police Service Retirement Pension Fund.
And our Finance Director is here.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. Bob Samario, Finance Director. And we're here to introduce an ordinance that would provide an increase of 10% to some of our retirees who were part of a 1927 that later became modified in 1937 retirement plan. Just by way of some background, we do have 3 defined benefit plans that the city is administering. 2 of them are what we call service retirement plans. One of the plans under Article 15 of our charter has 1 surviving member. It's the spouse of the retiree who's now aged 98. The other plan is an Article 15A plan that has 4 remaining pensioners, and that's the focus of this, primarily the focus of this presentation, but I just wanted to give you some context because it is relevant to hear this other part. We also have what's called a service, death, and disability plan. It's also under Article 15A where there are 11 remaining retirees or spouses. All 3 of these plans are closed plans, which means that nobody, of course, back in 1965 when we enrolled in PERS, no more retirees were part of that. And there were some who, at the time when we made the shift, who were still active, had the choice to be part of the PERS plan versus stay with the existing plan. Obviously, these folks are the ones who chose to stay with this plan. So again, we're focusing on the service retirement plan where there are 4 individuals receiving a pension. I know this was a question that was asked at the Finance Committee level. The ages of the folks who are receiving a pension, there are 2 retirees, ages 73 and 78, and then there are 2 surviving spouses of retirees who are ages 88 and 94. The 2 retirees have spouses, so if they precede their spouse, and then their spouses will continue to get the benefit. This is the only plan that is governed by a commission. It's the Board of Police and Fire Pension Commissioners. There are 5 members on that commission. And as with the other plans, this plan is ultimately the responsibility of the general fund. It does have some assets, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but it does have about $500,000 in assets that would cover the remaining pension obligations that's anticipated. But to the extent there's a shortfall, and we'll talk about this, that the general fund would have to make up any shortfall. Our records only go back to 1992, but it appears that back in 92, this plan was fully funded. Because it was a closed plan, there were no more active employees making money, putting money into it, so it was just really relying on interest earnings on the assets, which would then fund the pensions that were paid. Between 1992 and 2009, the plan became underfunded by about almost $494,000, primarily because, in my opinion, folks lived longer than was anticipated or was assumed back in 1990 or before, actuarially. I don't know how the assets performed, but my guess is that over time the assets perform reasonably well. It's just people live longer. than expected. So because of that, in 2010, the council actually approved the transfer of some monies from our self-insurance fund into this plan, totaling almost that exact amount by the unfunded portion of 493. Incidentally, we did transfer also at the time about $260,000 into the other retirement plan that we're going to talk about in a moment, where there are 11 members, because that also has, that actually is in an unfunded status right now. But over the last few years, with the economy returning and interest rates and returns doing better, that plan has currently become fully funded. There was a while when we became underfunded, even though we deposited some money. When the returns went down, it became sort of underfunded by a small amount. But now it's considered fully funded. The assets match what we expect to pay out in pensions benefits. So the commission is recommending an increase of a monthly pension amount by 10%. And that means in total, for all four of the pensioners, the total amount paid per month would go from $59.65 to $66.51, which is an average of about $149 per pensioner. And the rationale of the commissioners was that it's been at least 20 years, perhaps more, since they've received any kind of CPI increase. And unlike PERS, which has an automatic CPI built into that benefit, for these plans, there was no such provision made. And also, they felt that even though this 10% increase would cause the plan to be funded at a 90% level rather than 100%, they felt that was still a relatively strong position of the plan to be in. So the fiscal impacts, there aren't any immediate fiscal impacts. As I said, it depends on what actually happens for the remainder of this plan, to what extent the general fund would have to make up the difference or actually generate a surplus and keep that additional money. But at this point, the actuarially, it's going to create a $56,000 or $57,000 actual deficit, if you will, in this plan. Now, this is the slide that it did not present to the Finance Committee. I thought was pretty relevant, so I apologize to the committee members because this is new information in a sense, at least with recent information. We've talked about this in the past, but the other plans that we have, I mentioned there was the one plan, Article 15 plan, where there's one member. That member is relatively young, and the expected pension benefits to be paid out for the remaining life is $125,000. For the other plan, the Article 15A plan, there are 11 members, and the expected benefit payments over the remaining life, if you will, is about $400,000. Unfortunately, we have never had any assets built up in this fund. Not since I've been here for 18 years, this plan has been underfunded and has only gotten worse. Currently, it's the amount of assets we have are really in the negative. We have this fund that has a negative cash balance of about $754,000. The amount of money, therefore, that we should have in the bank and what is our unfunded liability is $1.3 million. So important information for you to know in the context of the Commission's recommendation. We are going to be starting this July 1st with the new fiscal year 15 budget, and going forward, we're budgeting $120,000 per year to go toward paying the pensions of these other plans, and it's more than what we're paying out each year. It's $102,000 that we're paying out each year, so we're providing a little bit more toward that, so we're actually doing, eating into that unfunded liability. But really, the number we have to kind of crack is the $754,000 negative cash, because if we can continue funding the 120, we're really at the end going to have to come up with address this negative cash balance that will go down over time. But we're only putting in another $18,000 of what we're paying out. It's going to be a while before we bring that number down. So at some point in the near future, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, we're going to have to address this number when the plan is finally closed. So our perspective is that we talk about actuarially that it's going to be underfunded by $56,000, but the fact is that because there are only 4 members in this plan, it's extremely volatile. And I, with all due respect, if one person passes away sooner than what's assumed, it's going to have a major impact or reduction on that liability, if you will. So the assumptions that the actuaries make on rate of return and how long people are going to live, it's really, when we're talking about 4 people versus 400, the numbers could change in any given year.
Mr. White has a question.
Thank you. Back to the 754, the red 754. So what's been happening then is that money's been paid to these people, and it's come out of other sources and has not been accounted for, and then you've discovered this issue, and now we're trying to make it right
Yeah,
somehow?
Madam Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember White, we've known about this for a while. We tracked this in a separate fund, but essentially it just means that we've been paying out of the general fund, and we really have $754,000 less in cash than the general fund that we sort of would present because we treat this as a separate activity in a separate fund. So we are running a negative cash balance in this plan, this fund. We've known about it, and we had to try to address it back in 2010 when we deposited about $260,000 into it, and at that time we reported to council that it still had a large deficit, if you will, and we were hoping to address it, but then when the economy hit and our revenues went down, it was sort of the wrong time for that. It's not something that's super urgent. At some point we're going to have to address it, but I just wanted to make sure you were aware of this. Because long term, we're going to eventually have to deal with this, and it provides some context to the current requests of this commission for the other plan.
And so, and I'm just trying to understand it from the accounting standpoint, then would if the general fund got to $754,000, the true amount of money in the general fund would be zero?
No, this is the general fund, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember White. The general fund has $10 million in cash,
I
for example.
appreciate that.
So in reality, and when we present our financial statements, we combine this fund with the general fund because essentially we know that the general fund has about $754,000 less in cash than we might look if we only looked at the general fund by itself. So the general fund's covering it. It's floating this fund by paying out the amounts that we don't have cash for to do so.
And I can appreciate that with time, as these other funds close, that is to say when there are no longer people in them, there could be surpluses left over, and that might be one way that the number is reduced.
That's true.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
So again, as I mentioned, that any remaining shortfall in any of these plans, but particularly the one we're talking about, or any surplus would accrue to the general fund or impact the general fund. We know at this point that it's almost impossible that the actuaries are right, that people are going to live exactly as long as they expect and the earnings will be exactly what they assume. So based on that, I would, and as staff, I would treat this request for a 10% increase as ultimately a request of general fund money or funding from the general fund, even though it's not going to happen this next year. We just don't know what's going to happen. It could be up or down, but actually speaking, essentially it's requesting $56,000 from the general fund on top of what it may be responsible for in the other plans. So the committee did consider this recommendation of the commission and voted 3-0 to recommend approval of the CPI increase. I will say, though, that this recommendation from the committee was made without the additional information that I provided in the other plans, so I just wanted to be open about that this is additional information that you might want to consider.
And that's the end of your presentation.
That's the end of my report.
Any more questions? Mr. White, you look ready.
A question, but just a comment that the increase in income to these folks that's proposed with this is very small, and the pensions are very small. This is certainly not the problem area or the. I mean, you just get a sense that these folks are getting a reasonable compensation with this. So I certainly supported then, and even with that additional slide, I continue to strongly support this item.
Very good. There's no speaker slips. Is there a motion or any other questions? Our city attorney has a comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. There's a technical error on the ordinance that I want to read a correction. The enacting clause currently reads, "Now therefore the council of the city of Santa Barbara does ordain as follows." We should strike "now therefore" and insert "city" between "the" and "council" so that it reads, "The city council of the city of Santa Barbara does ordain as follows." The charter specifies that language, which is why I'm being so particular about it.
Madam Clerk, did you get that? Okay, very good.
I move the recommendation with the amendment.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That looks like it carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. So item 16.
Award of contract for processing of recyclable material to Marburg Industries Incorporated.
Great. Thank you. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Four.
Good afternoon, Madam Pro Tem, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, council members. Matt Four, Environmental Services Manager. We're here to talk about a proposed agreement between the city and Marburg that staff from Marburg have recently come to tentative terms on to share in the revenue that's derived from the sale of recyclable material that's collected in dumpsters throughout the city. This is not a long presentation, but we will be covering some background information, talk a little bit about where our recyclable material goes today, discuss the contract terms, and give a little bit of an analysis from staff's perspective on the agreement, and then review the recommendation. So by way of background, really what happens to our recyclable material now? We collect recyclable material in carts. Those are the containers with wheels and a flipping lid, cans that are standalone cans with a separate lid, and big dumpsters, the big dumpsters that you see around the city. Marburg collects those pursuant to the franchise agreement that the city maintains with the company. We collect that material from residential and business customers. And when we talk about recyclable material in the context of the contract here, we're talking about what you see in your blue container, the paper, plastic, metal, cardboard, glass, those typical types of materials. So what happens to our recyclable material? As we said, it's all collected by Marburg in the city. Marburg then ultimately affects the transport of that material to a recycling facility where that recycling facility separates those mixed commodities in the container into their component parts. So the recycling facility will separate glass with glass, cardboard with cardboard, paper with paper. Those are then baled and shipped to market. With our carts and cans, when Marburg collects the cart and can material, it's ultimately taken to the county transfer station. County Public Works then transports that material in their trucks down to Gold Coast Recycling in Ventura. And with the dumpsters, Marburg collects the material and transports it to the David Love Place recycling facility out on the airport property. And in both cases, the material is sold on the open market. But when we bring in the revenue, this is another graph talks about the same process, but for the carts and cans, Marburg is the collector, Gold Coast Recycling is the processor, but with carts and cans, the city does in fact share in the revenue that's derived from the sale of that material. We've had that agreement with the county for several years, back to 2005. But with dumpsters, we've never had such an agreement with Marburg. So the dumpster recyclables are collected by Marburg, processed by Marburg, and then Marburg has traditionally kept the revenue from the sale of that, and that's what this contract does. This contract actually provides for a sharing of that revenue with the city. So with the contract that we're bringing forward, the terms, the scope of work is that Marburg will continue to process, separate, and market the recyclable materials collected from the recycling dumpsters in the city. They will provide the facility, the labor, the transportation, and maintain the permits. And again, as I said, this agreement really starts at the point that Marburg's trucks cross the threshold of the David Love Place recycling facility. All of the collection and the rates and all the other things to get that material to the recycling facility are all governed under the other franchise agreement that Council approved last February. So the length of the agreement is 5 years. It runs from January 1st of 2014. Actually, sorry, that should say 2014 through 2018. And then similar to our franchise agreement, there is language that if the city were to join in a regional cooperative resource recovery project-like facility, we would be able to terminate this agreement and redirect these recyclable materials to the more appropriate facility, being the resource recovery project. In terms of payments, this provides for a flat rate per ton of material that's delivered of $30.44 per ton. And it's on all source-separated recyclables that Marburg collects. There is an annual CPI adjustment that will adjust this price upward for the city, to the city's benefit. And then Marburg will act as the city's reporting agent to the state, to CalRecycle, as we need to report our recycling progress to them. What we like about the agreement, it does provide for competitive payment terms. The per ton rate of $30.44, just for context, the county has a similar agreement with Marburg. It's a little bit older, and their rate that they're getting from Marburg is $26.44 a ton, so we did a little bit better. And if we look at the historic prices, we took Marburg's brokered price against what we actually collected the last several years between 2009 and 2013. The median value of that was $29.89, so just slightly less, and the average was slightly more. So this is a good middle-of-the-road value that we think is fair, and it will bring in some sizable revenue for the Solid Waste Fund. We're projecting in the 6 months of 2014, of fiscal year 14, between January and June, that we will take in about $75,000, and for fiscal year 15, we're projecting $150,000. The other things that we like is that this agreement provides us with some stability, and as we've brought recycling discussions to council in the past, overall recycling has been a winner to the city. The material that we collect in carts and cans on a net basis has benefited the solid waste budget. But there is that volatility. Recycling commodity markets go up and down, and they're highly volatile. With this stable and competitive rate, this injects a level of stability that we have not had, but I think is prudent at this time. If we look at the range, the per ton range of values, it's gone everything from minus $3.19 all the way to a high of $42.52 over the past several years. And there is potential for revenue growth, not on the per ton value, but if you recall in our franchise agreement, Marburg is working with our large businesses and large multi-unit properties. The volume of recyclable material we project will increase over the next 5 years as Marburg satisfies its contractual agreement. And as the volume and tons of that material rise, so will the revenue that we derive off this agreement. And we think it's a sound short-term solution. In looking at our discussions on the resource recovery project, if we ultimately end up with a joint facility with the county in Goleta and Buellton and Solvang, ultimately that's the best place for this material to go. But as we go through those negotiations and the EIR process, this is a good short-term solution that provides some pretty good revenue for the city in the short term while we work on our long-range plans. So the staff recommendation is that Council recommend authorizing the finance director to execute a contract with Marburg Industries for the processing of recyclable material. And I'll just note that we did take this similar discussion to the Finance Committee last week, and they voted unanimously to support this recommendation to the full Council. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Councilmember Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Ford, so you mentioned this is a flat fee for us to recover some funds from the recyclables, and like you said, in the past we've had some market volatility where the bottom dropped out of the market, then we had revenue neutrality issues and so on and so forth. So this is a flat fee, so no matter what happens to the market, this is what we get per ton.
That's correct.
In the short term. And how long is this agreement for again?
This will go through 2018, June 30th of 2018.
Okay. And this obviously anticipates, I guess, on both parties' part, something coming on with the Revenue Resource Recovery Park. Resource recovery.
Can you restate that question?
Well, this anticipates that something is going to change at that point in time, I would think.
Well, we're looking at that option. We think that 5 years for both parties is a decent amount of time, and as we approach that 5-year mark, if we haven't, depending on where we end up with the resource recovery project, we could certainly extend this agreement or renegotiate terms or what have you. But for this 5-year period, we think that's a decent amount of time to continue.
And the EIR that's forthcoming anticipates the truck trips and how many directions we go with these materials at that when we come to make those determinations, right? Because it seems like you could potentially have these materials split up into different routes depending on the agreement, unless we came to some kind of a collective agreement on where they're going to be recovered.
The environmental impact report will certainly be looking at the base project at Teaguis and then several alternatives throughout the South Coast where we could site different components of the facility.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
I have a question. and maybe you said this in the beginning, why this wasn't worked out in the original big negotiations with Marburg in the beginning?
It's a good question. It's something that we intentionally split. At the negotiation table, we looked at folding this into the agreement. As you'll recall, when we came to terms on the franchise agreement, it was based on a whole set of revenue assumptions and cost assumptions throughout the 10-year term of the agreement. And we were all in agreement on those and very settled on those, and we didn't want to inject another element of high volatility into those discussions. So we thought, well, let's execute the agreement on the franchise side, and we all understand the assumptions, and we're all comfortable with the rates and the revenues and the costs associated with that. And then very quickly after that, we will get going on this separate agreement that could be much more volatile and has a whole other set of variables. So we just decided to disassociate the two, but we did agree to negotiate and come to terms on both.
Right, and it seems like dumpsters are the trigger that's an important part of this.
That's correct, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. This agreement covers only the source-separated blue dumpsters throughout the city that Marburg collects.
And we recently made a policy, right, to lower the cost of dumpsters so that we made a policy that would encourage people to recycle things or to use dumpsters rather than carts and cans because it would increase the recycling.
That's correct as well.
Recyclables.
The fiscal year 15 rate schedule adjusted the rates of recycling dumpsters in the multi-unit residential sector down slightly, and it increased the cost on a revenue-neutral basis of carts and cans to close the gap, the pricing discrepancy between the two.
And one final thing, I sometimes hear from people who are concerned about, I'll use the expression scavengers, that there are some people on recycle day who will go and take some of the valuable items out, and some residents don't mind and others wonder if it takes away from the city's profits. And I think you've told me before, and I just want to ask in this hearing, that we don't have the kind of problem other big cities, there are people who take too much out of the recycling. Is that right?
Scavenging does occur in the city. Where I have seen case studies that have really impacted the cities are cities like Los Angeles and Sacramento, who have even hired, additional staff to go out and do nothing but patrol because the problem was so pervasive. In our city, it certainly exists. Where we see prevalent, scavenging in one neighborhood and we get complaints from residents and citizens, then we do pass those on to the police department, and the beat coordinator will work with that neighborhood to help control it.
Okay, very good. There's no public speakers, I think, and if there's no other questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that was all 5 of us, I think. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Four. The next item, please.
Adoption of the operating and capital budget for fiscal year 2015, recommending that council adopt by reading of title only. A resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara adopting the budget for fiscal year 2015 by appropriating monies for the use and support of said city from the funds and to the purposes herein specified. B, a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara establishing the city's appropriation limitation for fiscal year 2015. C, a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara establishing certain city fees and rescinding resolution number 13048. D, a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara authorizing classified and unclassified positions in the city's service effective July 1, 2014, and providing a schedule of classifications and salaries for the same in accordance with the operating budget for the 2015 fiscal year. And E, a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara authorizing the continuation of capital and special project appropriations to fiscal year 2015.
Thank you. Mr. Samario, you're back.
I am. Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. So this is the easy part of the budget process. As you know, we've gone about 4 months or 3 months in putting this together. This is the adoption of all the resolutions that actually make the budget numbers effective July 1. So by way of background, and this is, of course, information you know, but I thought for the benefit of the public, we'd repeat this, and that is that for the fiscal year 2015 recommended budget, it was filed on April 22nd. A few months ago, we had 8 public hearings and budget work sessions, and as you know, all the departments were here presenting their respective budgets, and we had a chance for council to ask questions and the public to make comments and ask questions. The Finance Committee also reviewed portions of the budget during that time period. We had a final budget work session on June 2nd, and the council at that time took the following actions. They approved the contents of the recommended budget that was filed on April 22nd. They also approved recommendations from staff based on additional information that we had received since the filing of the budget, and those were reviewed and recommended by the Finance Committee for approval, and the council approved those as well. And then the council also directed staff to increase funding for a total of $1,019,947 in the general fund. $28,000 of that approximately was to come from the appropriated reserves, and the net to the general fund net impact would be a $991,424 impact to the bottom line. And we'll see how that kind of shakes out in terms of how we move from the recommended budget to the adopted budget. So there was the changes, specific changes that were made by council on the June 2nd. The enhancements to service and programs, I'm just going to read through them really quickly, so I apologize, but the at-risk youth programs, $94,408. Additional funding for parks maintenance, $65,000. One additional police officer with a cost of $145,807. Urban forest management plan implementation, some outreach work at $15,000. East Beach playground replacement, this is in the Parks, of course, area, $100,000. The third annual Santa Barbara Family Day and Health Fair, $5,000. A study at the Bonnet Park for the field turf there, at $75,000. Additional funding for community services officers is $150,000. This money will actually be part of the downtown parking fund. It'll be transferred out of the general fund, but that's where the monies will be really housed. There's $25,000 in design for a playground at the Muni Tennis Facility. Design review board stipends of $35,000. Additional hourly staff in the planning area for plan check to improve the turnaround time of $50,000. And the living wage audit should be $3,500, not $35,000. And that's going to fund one audit per year if that was an ongoing amount.
The item on community services officers for $150,000, I thought we had not decided that it was going to reflect not necessarily what Councilmember Rouse had suggested, that it was going through Downtown Parking Committee. Wasn't there still going to be some discussion that it might be what Councilmember White had suggested, which was a yellow shirt or a blue shirt or some other?
What our intention is that we thought that the intent, at least of a majority of the council, was that the city would contract for services for some type of, enhanced or host, security type services. And at least the initial, proposal from Councilmember Rouse was that it be supervised by downtown parking. What we're planning to do is we have a staff team working on a draft request for proposals that would list what that scope of work would be. And part of that process is they're going to do some research with similar programs throughout the state, where Santa Monica, Pasadena, a couple places in Los Angeles have similar programs. But they will come back to the City Council and have you approve the request for proposal and the scope of work before we actually go out and solicit, contract or bids.
Go ahead, Mr. Rouse.
Thank you. Yes, and if I may, we began to have that discussion on the dais, and Mayor Schneider appropriately said, let's go ahead and set aside the funding for this pilot program, and rather than getting the weeds on the nuts and bolts of exactly how it would work, we would develop it per Mr. Armstrong's suggestion that we put out RFP and come back and decide exactly how we want this to work.
Right, but it seemed like one proposal was to go through the Downtown Parking Committee, and the other one would be to go through the police department. So a light bulb went off when you referred to the Downtown Parking Committee.
From an accounting standpoint, our plan at this point was to put the money in downtown parking. Obviously, we're not going to spend any of it until two things happen. One, we come back to the city council and you approve the request for proposal. And as a part of that, if you say, no, we want to have the police department supervise it, we'll move the money back there. But then second, you'll have another bite at the apple when we actually get bids in, and then you'll approve the actual contract with the company to provide the services.
Downtown parking was a placeholder for right now, plus potentially the administrative body that would help us oversee this program.
Councilmember White?
Well, just that I would hope that at least we keep an open mind on it. That's the most important ingredient. We want the program. We want to get the best value for it, and I think that the discussion was strong enough around full range of options that encourages staff to go in that direction. So that's good enough for me at this point.
And right now, the team that's working on this is both the downtown parking people and the police department. That's the team that's putting together the scope of work.
Councilmember Hart?
Well, I think that this discussion clarifies and actually doesn't clarify it. It adds to what we talked about previously, that I think there's a commitment from the council to have the resources available in the budget to address this issue that's on the table, and that we're open to a lot of different ways to solve that problem. We're going to get a lot of information back. We're going to hear back from staff as to the pluses, minuses, the various options, and then we're going to make a decision. So really, the decision today is a resource issue, $150,000 from the budget aimed at this problem, and we're committing, I think, collectively to solving that problem with those resources. How we do it exactly is a decision for another day.
And the solution will dictate essentially where the money's actually going to be accounted for. Right now, it just happens to be in the downtown parking fund, but it could wind up somewhere else. So I wouldn't be too concerned about where the money is today. The solution is what's going to be important. That'll dictate where we account for that.
Well, thank you for that, but I am concerned about where it is.
Okay.
And when we had our budget discussion, it seemed clear to me that a majority of the council was not supportive of Councilmember Rouse's proposal. Maybe I'm not remembering correctly, but if everyone else is comfortable with it being housed there for now, we really need to have a discussion about that. I just believe that the function should be in the police department. That's where we get the most control of behavior in the downtown area. Okay, so please continue, because I interrupted you. Thank you.
In addition to that, we had some funding to outside organizations that was approved. BC Central, $10,000. Casa Esperanza, $125,000. The Central Coast Collaborative on Homeless, $16,232. The Community Choice Aggregation Study, $5,000. The Film Festival, that's already receiving money, an additional $25,000. And then additional funding for East Side Lighting, which is going to be determined by staff. That's $25,000. The SB 211 Helpline Program, $20,000. And then the Spirit of 76, the Memorial Day Flag Safety Improvements, $5,000. And then additional funding to Summer Solstice of $25,000.
And for each of these funding, at some point relatively quickly, you'll see an agreement with these organizations on in terms of how the money will be spent. Or if it's additional funding, it'll be incorporated into the existing agreements we have.
So this is how the numbers look. Now on the left is the recommended budget that was filed on April 22nd. And you'll see that the first, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to just give you the description. The first number represents the use of reserves, and it's a little misleading, but the $1.6 million represents the surplus we had generated back in 2013. And our new policy says that 50% of our surplus goes towards capital, so we programmed that now for capital, which is part of the $2.9 million below. But you can see that the recommended budget also provided for a surplus of $1,023,000. And then the staff recommended adjustments totaled a net of $32,000. We had some additional costs for retirement. That was just a mistake that we had made in forecasting those costs. That was the majority of that. We were able to identify up at the top about $141,000 of new revenues. Some went down, some went up, but on a net basis, we were able to adjust those based on new information. And then the final adjustments that I just went through, totaling $991,000, were per the direction of council. So you can see now that our budget now still uses reserves for capital, but on an operating basis, we are fully balanced, so there's no surplus in the adopted budget anymore. So quickly just going through the resolutions, the item A, resolution A, is the adoption of the capital and operating budget for 15. And you'll see that it details each of the departments in the general fund as well as each fund, what their total appropriations are and along with estimated revenues. Item B is the adoption of Article 13B appropriations limit. This was something that came out of the early 80s, Paul Gann's initiative that essentially sought to limit the amount of appropriations that can come from revenues in local governments. That calculation, because it was modified in terms of how we do it in the mid-90s, it's no longer really relevant. We are well below that limit. We also have a master fee resolution within which we have all the resolutions, all the fees, I should say, for citywide. So any fee that we charge is contained within, and we organize it by department. We also have a resolution that authorizes all the positions citywide along with their salary ranges. And then lastly, there's a resolution that authorizes the city administrator to carry over certain appropriations from 14 to 15. Our policy is, and our part of our budget process is that any appropriations at the end of the year lapses. However, with certain appropriations related to special projects and primarily with capital projects, this authorizes the city administrator to review those and carry those over that were intended to really be multi-year budgets, if you will. So our recommended action today is to adopt all the resolutions related to the fiscal year 2015 operating and capital budget. Item C, since we have 2 members of council that have some potential conflict with slip fees, we're going to recommend that that section of the fee resolutions, the waterfront harbor slip, mooring, and user fees, which are contained in pages 124 through 138, that they be taken next week when we have a full council, but that the rest of the resolution and fees be approved by council today. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Councilmember Hart?
I actually don't have a question, but I know that there is another issue that we have some public speakers that are going to talk about, and that is the business license fee that as it applies to artists. We had a presentation at the Finance Committee, and as also folks came and spoke at the council as well. You know, it's an item that's going to take a little more time and dialogue with the arts community to resolve. You know, the fee schedule in the budget, you know, we can't hold up the budget because of that issue, but it's an important issue that needs to be addressed, and I know we're going to hear from folks. But I do think that it's appropriate for us to, you know, acknowledge that issue and be engaged in trying to find a solution. Really commit staff resources and time to working with the art community to find a way to relieve the concern that's out there. It's a real concern about the applicability of the business license fee to artists and how we're going to make that workable in the long term.
Very good. I appreciate that. Councilmember White?
Well, 3 comments. One is that I share those concerns, and that I hope that we can come to a place where we're looking sometime into the future to have a real conversation about that, the business license issue, which was raised at that time. Secondly, the GAN initiative piece, I don't ask for a clarification of it today. I had put my little paperclip on a page here, which makes no sense to me, and I would ask that perhaps the finance director could make a little time to explain words. Gosh, there's some really crazy words in here.
I would love to spend time with you talking about that.
Yeah, it's really something. Anyway, it doesn't even have an exhibit number on it. But anyway, the GAN initiative. And then finally, I had understood that on the living wage audit that we were going to do that once and then at least have a look at that before we invest in some more audits. And so that was my understanding on that, rather than that we were just making that part of a long-term deal. So that was
and just for clarification,
a significant amount of money, but that was, I wanted to see what we're getting for that, rather than just go on and on and on with it.
Yeah, and just for clarification, I mentioned that would pay for one audit, and I only mentioned that if it were to become an ongoing item, it would be one audit a year, but it's certainly just at this point treated as a one-time funding.
And I think we should evaluate it after the audit, Councilmember White. So there are no speaker slips, but I see people out there, and you're very welcome to address us on issues that concern you. And I would also like to ask staff for an update, because I've seen emails about the there's been discussions, right, between staff and the artists who are concerned about the business license issue. Sir?
One minor issue, and I may need the help from the city attorney, is the fees and charges you have today do not include any adjustments to the city's business license tax. So you're not really acting on the business license tax today. So, I mean, their comments maybe in the overall context of the budget maybe are allowable, or they should have come earlier, but you're really not allowed to take any action on the business license tax today because you're not really making any adjustments to it.
Okay, Mr. Wyatt?
And thank you for that, but we are in a position at least to say this is a matter of concern and that ask staff to bring it back sometime in the future as an item of discussion and hopefully potential action.
Certainly, yeah.
Okay. And would you like to come up and speak? You're welcome to speak, and please fill out a form afterwards. Yeah, afterwards.
I hadn't planned on this, but I'm Doreen White. I'm Community Liaison for Southern California Artists Protecting the Environment. And I just wanted to point out, I've been doing a little research. The artist community, through their donations to the Off the Wall, they raised $81,000 this year. The Art from Scrap fundraiser, based upon the local artists, raised $50,000. The Visual Arts and Design Academy at Santa Barbara High, through the artists' donations, raised $16,000. And I know the Southern California Artists Protecting the Environment over the last 10 years has raised about $140,000 for environmental groups. So I think I've also talked to Kate Schwab of the First Thursday, and the benefit to the community, to the restaurants, the revenue coming in has hugely increased. Also with the after First Thursday events, how popular that is, and just she's really reinforced what an impact the artist community is having. And I just want that as part of the picture, when they consider our business licensing.
Very good.
Okay.
And if you would fill out a slip
I will.
and give it to this lady.
Okay.
And then that way the staff would also have your name in terms of starting that conversation. But I know you or other representatives have been in touch.
Yeah, Kathy Smith is president of Santa Barbara Art Association, and Marie Arnold, president of the Goleta Valley Art Association, and Susan Price, a past board member of the Santa Barbara Art Association. Group of us have been meeting and also consulting with, like the Santa Barbara Printmakers, Santa Barbara Sculptors Guild, and all the other artist groups, and making a little coalition and getting their support in what we present and how we interact. So
we appreciate that.
And we represent about 1,000 artists all total.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks. So that's settled. So, Mr. Armstrong, the motion would say move staff recommendation with item C as stated, something like that?
What we would recommend on item C is that you act on all of item C except for pages 124 until the end of that fee resolution, which relates to the waterfront, and then we would ask that you continue the waterfront fees and charges to your meeting next week, because two members have a potential conflict in that we don't have a quorum.
And Madam Mayor Pro Tem, excuse
Yes.
me for interrupting, just to save the city clerk's sanity, I'll put together another resolution for the waterfront fees for next week.
Oh, okay, that sounds good. Mr. White?
And Madam Mayor Pro Tem, do we then abstain? I mean, it's a sub-quorum vote. Do we abstain? What do we do with a continuation on that?
I think what we're recommending is that you basically move to approve the fee resolution, excluding the section related to the waterfront, and then you don't have a conflict.
Okay. All right. Well, then I would.
You would have a conflict on moving to continue it, but less than a 4 can make that motion.
Okay. All right.
I'll make a motion if that helps.
Make a motion.
I'll move the staff recommendations A through E with the exception of pages 124 through 138. I think it was 138 before it went away, which will be deferred to the next council meeting.
Second. I think you'd better, okay, very good. So only the three of us, no, all of us can vote on that. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And is that it then on that item? Okay, great. No, Mr. White.
And I would move that council request staff to come back to council at some point this year with a discussion of the business license fees vis-a-vis low income, the issue of low income businesses and artists in particular. I think that we know that staff is very familiar with the issue, but to come back with a full discussion of that item.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. Thank you. Okay. The next item, please, Madam Clerk.
Item 18, 2013 Annual Energy Report.
Are you ready, Mr. Dewey?
I am ready. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, council members. I'm Jim Dewey, the Facilities and Energy Manager, and with me is Alelia Parento, our Energy Analyst, and I'm going to provide you the 2013 Annual Energy Report. Starting off with electricity, we had a fiscal year 2013 expenditure of about $3.4 million. And the pie chart shows the basic breakdown. And this hasn't really changed a whole lot as far as departments and specific areas are concerned. We have seen some growth in the airport energy expenditures because of the new airport terminal. And also this year, the historic terminal came online too, so they saw a little bit of an increase in electricity from that. But primarily what we're looking at is we've seen growth in these areas, and these are areas that we're really focusing on now. This is where we use most of our electricity. Street lighting, the treatment and the delivery of clean water, and then the pumping and treatment of wastewater. So in street lighting, as you know, there's really been an increased demand for street lighting. And so we've seen those numbers increase over time. And what we're doing now is trying out new technologies. We're rolling out light-emitting diode type street lighting, and that should bring, the total energy that we use for street lighting down over time. But there is an increased demand for street lighting. In the area of water, you've heard a lot about and been involved in the ozone water treatment at the Cater Water Treatment Plant. And of course, ozone is created with electricity. And so in that process, we get cleaner water and it improves water quality, but there is also a cost to that. And then in the area of wastewater, the El Estero Wastewater Treatment Plant is really our largest electricity account. There's a lot of energy business going down at El Estero. So we're always looking at that and looking for opportunities to save there. This chart shows our energy expenditure over time since 2007 and 2013 dollars. And as you can see, we have a steady downtrend. Until this year, we did see some increases in our electricity this year, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But as you can see, you can see the actions that we've taken to reduce our energy costs over time as far as electricity is concerned. This chart shows our purchased electricity in terms of energy in millions of kilowatt hours from all of our different purchased electricity sources. So this is both the Southern California Edison purchased electricity plus the power purchase agreements that we've had over time. So currently, the only power purchase agreements that we have are the corporate yard photovoltaic system and then the new cogeneration system at El Estero. Now, the cogeneration system just came on at the beginning of this year, so we don't really show a lot of results from 2013 with that, but it'll have a major impact this year and years to come. But as you can see, in 2008, when the energy team really became active, we've been able to drive electricity use down until 2012. In 2012, we set a new baseline in that we added some major loads. We added the airport terminal, the fire station administration building, and then we also assumed responsibility for the electrical account at the Larson building or the police annex building. So with those increases, that kind of reset our baseline again, and we've been working downwards ever since. In 2013, we did bring on, like I mentioned before, the historic terminal at the airport, which increased our electricity a little bit. And then there were some electrical increases that were due to the construction of the ozone water treatment at Cater. So it didn't actually have to do with generating ozone, but there was a lot of pumping that needed to happen where we were rerouting water to different areas. And so there was extra energy that needed to be expended in order to get that project constructed. This shows our largest electrical increases since last year, beginning with the Cater water treatment plant. And really, most of this shows the impact of the Cater ozone construction period. So it includes a little bit of increases directly to the Cater water treatment plant, and then a lot of supporting pumping systems. And then, of course, if you look at the bottom of that sheet, you have the airport, and that's due directly to the historic terminal coming online. This is a table of our largest electrical accounts, and this hasn't really changed too much over time. Our largest electrical account is the El Estero wastewater treatment plant, and it's seen a modest decrease from 2012 to 2013, followed by the Cater water treatment plant. The airport is our third largest account, and then Marina One, which is our single largest commercial marina, which is basically serves boats and recreational vehicles. And that's seen an increase of about 6%. We have one of our largest accounts. This is actually our largest street lighting account, is the ornamental street lighting, the downtown lighting. And what that is, it's the ornamental lighting in the El Pueblo Viejo area. So we have the State Street fixtures, our own custom fixtures, the Chapala fixture, the Carrillo fixture. So all of the downtown ornamental lighting, and that's a lot of electricity. And then the police department uses a lot of electricity also. In the area of natural gas, last year we spent about $150,000 in natural gas. So most of our natural gas is used just to provide heating for buildings, with the exception of Parks and Recreation. A lot of their gas use has to do with heating all of the pools that they have, including the Los Baños Del Mar pool.
Mr. Dewey, Councilmember Rouse has a question.
Thank you. Mr. Dewey, before we left electricity, I was just trying to justify or reconcile the two purchased electricity graphs side by side. You had the kilowatt hour used versus the purchased electricity but adjusted for 2013 dollars. So I was trying to make these graphs match up in my beady little mind here. In terms of the dollars spent adjusted for, I guess adjusted backwards up for 2007 to make those $2013.
Right.
But then looking at the usage, the purchase by from Edison of kilowatt hours of electricity, the graphs, I'm just kind of trying to get figured how that is it the adjustment for the CPI and the dollars greater than the actual increase of the rates of the kilowatt hours?
Well, Councilmember Rouse, there's a couple of things going on here. First of all, the one, if you look at 2007, that's really where the where this chart begins.
Right.
And so if we compare that against 2007, 2008, there's a couple of things going on. We have energy conservation happening, and then we've also done a lot of rate restructuring. So the actual cost of the commodity, we've been able to drive that down quite a bit. So it's the kind of a dual action. So you don't really see a direct correlation there, in terms of energy conservation necessarily, because there's another component. We've also lowered the cost of the commodity.
But we're actually consuming the kilowatt hours as showed on the graph, though.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's a little arcane, but yeah, I think I can get there. Thank you.
Okay.
Councilmember White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Well, I thought it was an interesting piece during the time when Mr. Dewey was negotiating those deals, because there were things like, as I recall, Pershing Park was one of them, where it was on a fancier rate system, and he found that it could go on a lower cost method of charging electricity, and so even though the lights were, exactly, just got it for a cheaper price. So thought it was a pretty neat thing, yeah.
Okay. I was going to ask about the hydroelectric plant. Is that what you're referring to, the micro hydro in one of the last slides? No.
Yes, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I'll cover that.
I can wait.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
I just thought if you were leaving electricity, but thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, please.
So this is our natural cost expenditure, our natural gas expenditure by year in 2013 dollars. And you can see there also there is a downward trend. And this also is a combination not only of energy conservation, but the commodity price has dropped over time considerably since 2008. So you can see a big drop there. This is our natural gas usage by year. This has remained roughly, fairly flat. We've been focusing mostly on energy conservation, although we have had, or electricity conservation, but we did put in a high-efficiency boiler at the Los Banos Del Mar pool that had a significant drop in our natural gas usage. You can see that coming in 2012. Here's our largest natural gas accounts, beginning with the Los Banos Del Mar pool. We've had a 7% decrease from last year, which was on top of a 25% decrease from the year before that. So we're saving quite a bit of natural gas at the Los Banos pool with the high-efficiency boilers. The airport uses a lot of gas. They've seen a small decrease. We use a lot of gas for heating the Public Works corporate yard. And then we have two accounts here that appear to be, a major increase in gas usage. But actually what happened last year, there was a dip in both of those accounts, and then they came back up to status quo. So this is, shows something that it's just kind of coming back to where it was. But both of these accounts do use a lot of gas. And fortunately, this next year, we're going to be replacing all of the air conditioning equipment, all the heating and ventilating and cooling equipment at the police department, and we'll be eliminating a boiler completely. So the gas usage at the police department will go down to hardly anything. And right now we're in design for the major renovation of the Caprillo Pavilion and Arts Center, and we'll be replacing all of the air conditioning equipment, heating equipment then too. So we'll see some decreases there too. Looking at our renewable energy portfolio, this chart shows our renewable energy as a percentage of all of the electricity that we purchase. And so looking where the arrow is, that's 2013. Right now in 2013, we have about 23% renewables. And most of that is coming from the renewable portfolio maintained by Southern California Edison. The rest of it is the contribution from our photovoltaic systems. And the thing to note here is the years further out as the cogeneration system at El Estero has been running since the beginning of 2014, and we're going to see its impact next year. So we're going to be looking at our percentage of renewables in terms of electricity exceeding a third. Coming up next year. And then there's going to be some other contributors to that, too, I'll talk about in a moment. This table shows all of our current photovoltaic projects. We haven't added any solar for a little while now, since 2010. The first project is our corporate yard, and that's our largest photovoltaic system that was funded with a power purchase agreement installed in 2008. Then our next largest system is a city-owned system at the airport quick turnaround rental car facility. and that's 190 kW. And then we have a couple of smaller systems at Fire Station 2 and 1. And so combined, they provide enough power to, enough electricity to power 150 local area homes. So this chart shows the monthly output from our corporate yard photovoltaic system. And this system provides 99% of the electrical needs for 630 Garden Street, the corporate yard, and the Laguna complex. So that whole campus is virtually powered from solar. And then this slide shows, the graph shows the production of the airport quick turnaround photovoltaic system in green and the usage of that facility in gold. And so we're supplying 88% of the electrical needs of that facility with solar. And a quick update on the fats, oils, and grease station at the El Estero wastewater treatment plant. This has been in operation
April 2013.
almost a full year now. And basically, this takes a material called brown grease, which is extracted from grease interceptors at restaurants primarily. That's processed through Marburg Industries, and then daily they deliver that material to us, and that's pumped into this facility. And that's a storage tank you can see in the background there. And we meter that material, the fats, oils, and grease, into the anaerobic digesters at El Estero. And in turn, that increases the amount of methane that we produce through that process at El Estero. And that methane is used to produce electricity and heating through our cogeneration plant at El Estero. And so our first year results, last year we delivered about 466,000 gallons of fog material, and that eliminated 93 truck trips to Kern and Fresno County, which has a carbon offset of about 100 metric tons just in transportation. The system is performing well. We haven't had any negative impacts on the plant, and we're ready to receive more material. Right now, Marburg is delivering about 2,000 gallons per day. And if you look at the pie chart there, we actually have a feedstock of about 80,000 gallons per day. So the amount of fog material is actually a very small percentage of everything that's coming into the anaerobic digesters. So we have some room for growth there. And as far as its impact is concerned, we've seen a couple of things, and these are preliminary numbers, but this is what we've seen so far, is that the quantity of methane in each cubic foot of gas has increased by 7%, and we've also had an 11% total increase in biogas. So we're looking at about an 18% increase in the energy produced at El Estero, and we believe that this can be attributed directly to fog and its introduction. And so what that means as far as energy production is concerned is about 480,000 kilowatt hours per year extra generated by the cogeneration system, which is enough energy to power 87 local area homes. Another success story that I'd like to talk about is our direct install program. This year we installed a lot of high-efficiency T8 lighting, motion sensors that control the lighting, so some LED lighting and window film on a number of our facilities, and those facilities are listed in that table on the right. And direct install was a cooperative effort between the city and Southern California Edison, and the funding for this was provided through public purpose goods funds, so it didn't directly cost the city anything, but we received a benefit of about $146,000 worth of retrofits, and those lighting retrofits save us about $30,000 a year in electrical costs. So that was, more or less didn't cost us anything. We just participated in that and got it done. The two pictures are from the Cater water treatment plant, one of their equipment bays. This just shows that, the new lighting is so much better that it not only saves energy, but it also greatly improves the light quality. So staff is really happy with that project. Looking at the energy team savings, the one-time savings for this year, including grants, rebates, and the direct install project, we brought in about $244,000 in funding in 2013. And then from all of our actions taken in the area of energy conservation and rate restructuring, we're currently saving an annual savings of about $465,000. So that's annually. And looking into the future, right now we're involved in an energy efficiency project to improve the efficiency of the large influent pumps at the El Estero wastewater treatment plant. We're looking at opportunities for microhydro in our water supply system. Anywhere there's a pressure differential is a opportunity for microhydro. Right now, we're just looking at that. We haven't found any opportunities for that yet, but it's something that we will be investigating. We'll be replacing all of the air conditioning systems at the police department building with high efficiency variable refrigerant volume heat pumps, and that'll happen this next year. We are almost in construction on replacing all the outdoor lighting at El Estero with induction lighting, which will cut our lighting bill by about half just for the outdoor lighting. We are involved in a study that was grant funded that will help us to identify how to better fund our projects internally at the city for energy conservation. And then Jeff McKee at the airport, this is kind of exciting, had very good responses to his request for proposal for the photovoltaic system out there that will be funded under a power purchase agreement. And this will be an 800 kW system that would be installed at the airport long-term parking facility. And the numbers on that look really good right now. So we're looking forward to that happening.
Councilmember Francisco has a question.
Thank you. Mr. Dewey, could you go back to the previous slide, please? So this shows us one-time savings in terms of grants or rebates, and it shows us annual savings in terms of what we would have spent that we didn't have to spend on energy, correct?
Correct.
And what about the costs of achieving these? Do you have numbers on those?
Councilmember Francisco, yes, I do. As far as return on investment and those types of numbers, if I can give you a breakdown of that, I don't have that right here. I mean, most of our, in terms of, just simple payback, most of our projects have a simple payback less than 4 years. So as far as return on investment, that's a pretty high number. But I can get you some specifics if you'd like that.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested in the details. Thank you very much.
And then next, looking at our greenhouse gas emissions. These are our greenhouse gas emissions from all city operations. So that includes the emissions from electricity that we purchase, vehicle fuel, natural gas, and all other sources. And where that arrow is, that's 2013. And it's basically stayed more or less flat the last couple of years. We're still well below our Kyoto goal. But in 2014, that's where we'll start to see the impact of the El Estero cogeneration system. And then further down the line, if we are able to successfully install the solar systems at the airport, we'll see that further be driven down. And I'll handle your questions.
Okay. Councilmember Rouse.
Thank you. Kind of to follow up on the theme of Mr. Francisco's, so we have a general return on investment of about 4 years or so with most of these improvements. And then, because I was wondering, for example, the usable life of a photovoltaic cell versus some of these other improvements and how that balances out in our long-term plan for sustaining these kinds of improvements. Clearly, we've got a good trend going on, so.
Correct. Councilmember Rouse, the life of photovoltaic systems is really, at first, a lot of people are saying that you get a lot of degradation of the system after about 20 years, but now people are projecting that the life of these things are really around 30 years. And the way that we look at, our largest projects, of course, are funded with the power purchase agreement. So what we're looking at there is, just trying to, we're locking in a commodity at a certain cost. So really we're kind of, hedging against, future increases in peak energy costs. And so it really is sort of a hedging mechanism for that. And one of the nice things about this most recent proposal is that, every time that we go out for a proposal, we have this analysis sheet that gives us a net present value of, of every proposal. And these were all very much net present value positive for us. And so the cost of solar is going down, and it's becoming more economical. Of course, the incentives are going away too at the same time, but that was the purpose of the incentives, was to drive the cost down and create a market for it. Does that? I don't know if that answered your question directly.
Yeah, well, more or less, because having watched some of these different innovations and technologies come on board, and some rotate out or amortize based on the new technology or what's available. But, so far, this is, like I said, it's a great trend and great report. So I was just kind of curious if you've got your present-day calculations and your future calculations going out at least 4 years, but I was just thinking about in terms of our planning and our abilities and where we would plow in these savings, for example, and in future energy capital, savings accounts, or if we've got that kind of mechanism. I don't know how we would plan for that.
Yeah, we are forward-looking as far as the technology is concerned. One of the things that we're seeing now is that LED technology has really come into its own lighting-wise, and you can see that when you go to the hardware store. Lights that used to cost, $40 or $50, now you can buy for $9. And their lighting quality is vastly improved too, and that'll be driven down. Eventually, things like the compact fluorescent just won't exist anymore because the LEDs are so much better. So solid-state lighting is going to come into the picture. There's some things that we can't really anticipate. If there's a major break in photovoltaic technology, it's hard to tell. We try to stay up on the technologies as best we can. But, when we make an investment, like in photovoltaics, we're expecting those systems are going to be there for 25, 30 years, and unless there's a real compelling reason to replace them. And we haven't seen that so far. Right now the technology is pretty good.
Mr. Hart?
So the constraint on doing more the solar installations like you described at the airport, is that constraint going to be looked at in terms of the energy efficiency revolving fund study? Is there a linkage between those two?
Councilmember Hart, no, there isn't really a linkage directly between those two. What we're studying in that particular study is a way that we can internalize our savings so that we can invest more in energy conservation. So it's the idea of establishing a purchase utilities account, and then when we get energy conservation, we're able to set aside a certain amount of that money that can be directed towards energy conservation. Right now, the energy program is really, I guess you could say it's being subsidized by the general fund, in that we have our allocated costs that come in and fund that program. And they're basically from the general fund, although there are enterprise funds contributing to that. But there'll be a more direct connection possibly. And this is just a study. It's not something that we're actually going to commit to doing. We'll come back to council and we'll present the findings from this and see where it goes.
So the idea would be that the savings that you are generating in terms of energy use would be captured within a fund that then would be used to be reinvesting in additional conservation measures so that it would be able to sustain itself independent of general fund investment.
Correct.
Okay, I get that part of it. So then On the photovoltaic side, what is the constraint then? It sounds as though, the return on investment numbers are good. The projects that have been done are successful. Purchase power agreements are available. Is there a facility constraint? There's a lot of land at the airport. Why would we just not be doing more of that?
There is a constraint in that there's two things going on. One of the constraints citywide is that we don't have the real estate for a large photovoltaic system. And in order to get a power purchase agreement, it has to be a large system. So, we're not going to be able to fund a small system with a power purchase agreement. But in terms of the airport and the land that it has, also, the size of the system, the economics of it vary. You don't want to generate more electricity than you use, and that's the constraint there. Because you've definitely run into issues as far as if you're producing more energy over time. There's a number of ways that you can account for that, but you're basically going to be paid from Southern California Edison about 4 cents per kilowatt hour for that, and that doesn't work for us.
And so that's the limitation, is the meter at the airport is treated as a separate entity from the rest of the city's separate meters as well.
And right now, we don't have the ability to aggregate them, although there is a law that says that we can combine our large time of use accounts and be able to produce more in one area and then apply that as a credit to another account, as long as you haven't participated in the California Solar Initiative, which we did. And so because of that, if we were able to fund it without any support from the California Solar Initiative, then we could do that.
Looking forward.
I
see. So is that an opportunity? There certainly is lots of physical space at the airport for photovoltaic installation.
It is an opportunity, and we would have to look into that further. So we'd have to look into a little bit more about the rulings of that particular law and about the wheeling of power and where we could apply it.
Okay.
And I might add that we're excited about the new airport, or the airport project we're working on, but this is the second time we've received proposals. The first time was a couple of years ago, and we got 3 proposals, and when we negotiated with the folks, we actually couldn't come to a deal where it made sense. And so I think the economics in the solar industry have changed really dramatically. So this time we got 8 proposals, and we interviewed 3. We've narrowed it down, but the numbers look so much better than they looked just 2 years ago. And the other issue at the airport is the plan is in the parking lot to do covers in the parking lot. If you look at the airfield, we have to also negotiate through the bureaucracy of the FAA and on the airfield, and they've got a lot of concerns about where you can put them relative to the runways and also the reflection for airplanes and stuff like that. So we have to navigate that if we start looking at projects on the airfield proper.
So is the long-term airport parking area, is it the one that's physically located adjacent to the terminal, or is it the other one that's at Fairview, near Fairview?
The one we're looking at is adjacent to the terminal there.
Okay, well, there is that big lot that is available, over there, the old parking lot. That seems like a very large area that doesn't have as many of those regulatory issues, I would imagine. So that seems like a good candidate.
And that's another candidate, but it's also in a floodplain, too.
But we're talking about elevated photovoltaic structures. So again, I guess what I'm saying is I understand too that the economics have changed recently in the last couple of years, and that's some momentum that we ought to be looking aggressively at taking advantage of, I think, and that is, I understand the physical limitations of the downtown properties that we have, but I would encourage looking really carefully at some of these things that are outside the box because there is a good return on investment, and it makes a lot of sense. So.
Thank you. Mr. White.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And as I understand it, on all of these projects, or at least many of them, with the cogen being one, that one of those big sources of capital is a tax break in the private sector. And I'm not sure even how that gets put on the books. It also, but it does translate take a facility that would not be feasible if we were to just put up the cash ourselves and build it and then try and get a return on it, which would be the hope. I mean, then we would get really great savings, but there is this chunk of capital that comes in with smoke and mirrors, as they say, out by making it a tax break in the private sector. And does that get translated? Do we see that in any of your accounting when you're doing this?
Councilmember White, no, you won't see the accelerated depreciation or anything like that in our accounting. We do see it when we locked in our price, for 10 years at a flat rate, though. And I mean, we can back that out and account for it, but that wasn't part of our accounting. We were just looking for a number.
Right. No, I can appreciate that's the other side of the equation. But as far as Mr. Francisco's question, I mean, I could see that being something. If you were looking at the true cost of something, that's a major.
If we're looking at the true cost, that's being assessed to the California taxpayers.
Well, and national taxpayers. Anyway, it's that's the kind of the point that I was trying to, where I would agree with you. It's worth consideration.
My question that I was referring to earlier was about the hydroelectric plant at the Cater facility. Is it under construction, or what? Do you have an update on that, Mr. Dewey?
I do not.
That's not you. That's somebody else.
That actually is Bob Roebuck, and Rebecca Bjork will address that.
I'm glad you're here, Ms. Bjork. Go ahead.
Mayor Pro Tem Murillo, Rebecca Bjork, Public Works Director. We are under contract for construction of that facility at this time. There are a couple of long lead time items that we needed to order, so they're in the construction process, although there's no actual physical construction at the plant yet. Regardless, given the state of our water supplies, we're not losing much in the way of opportunities for electrical generation currently.
Okay, thank you for that. So there's no more questions. We had one speaker, but he left. His comment was passive improvements. So we can take that for what it. Maybe we need to be more aggressive in our improvements. Mr. Dewey, thank you so much. Thank you for a good report. I don't think we need to take a vote, right? Very good. So the next item is reports from the council. Have we been going places and doing things? Councilmember Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. The regular meeting of the Downtown Parking Committee, we talked about the upcoming bike station in operation in Lot 3, and that's going forward in good progress. And also the occupancy reports for the different lots show us impacted very greatly in lots 4 and 5 as usual, and hoping to be able to divert some other traffic to other lots such as Lot 6. And then yesterday I attended the Marburg reception for they got the Green Award. Forget what the actual title exactly was, but once again they've shown themselves to be exemplary in being a green business, and shown once again that they were a very good choice as our contracting waste hauler.
Very good. Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I attended the Neighborhood Advisory Council meeting last Wednesday, and saw for the first time the city's water conservation roadshow. It was really lively and informative, and I sure hope that lots of folks get to see that show, because it's very helpful in showing us how to conserve water, and clearly that's a core issue for all of us right now. And the other presentation made was Mark Alvarado giving a presentation on a neighborhood revitalization program that he's hoping to model, hoping that the city models against some activities that he's done in other cities in previous years. So he's getting his committee involved in that revitalization effort.
Thank you. I have a couple of quick items. I attended the League of Women Voters annual meeting this weekend, and they voted to form a committee looking at district elections versus at-large elections. And these are women. There's a handful of men, but they really take their public policy seriously, and so we can expect a thorough examination of our electoral process. I'm looking forward to that. And then I also attended a graduation of the Mobile Waterford program, and that's a program that prepares Spanish-speaking children before they go to kindergarten. And when we talk about the achievement gap or a gang prevention, I mean, these are low-income kids that are given a real boost as they start school, and it's a really nice event. So I congratulate all the 4-year-olds that graduated last week. And so we have a closed session, Madam Clerk.
Item 19, conference with city attorney regarding existing litigation. Sarah Lynn Wager versus City of Santa Barbara, SBSC, case number 1415112.
Very good. And so we won't be reporting back, and we'll adjourn the meeting.
Perhaps I had a wicked child.